This is Ashley Newby, and you're listening to the Black Studies Podcast, a Mellon Grant-sponsored series of conversations examining the history of the field. Our conversations engage with a wide range of activists and scholars, senior figures in the field, late doctoral students, cultural workers, political organizers, and everyone in between in order to explore the cultural and political meaning of Black studies as an area of inquiry and its critical methods. Studies Podcast. Today, we have a very special episode because we have several of the members of the African American and African Studies Department at Michigan State University. We have the inaugural chairperson, Dr. Ruth Nicole Brown. We have Dr. Suban Nur Cooley, an assistant professor in the department, Dr. LeConté Dill, an associate professor in the department, and Dr. Yvonne Morris, who is the academic specialist. So thank you all so much for being with us today. To get started, I know that one, being an alumni of Michigan State University and the AAAS program, now department, I would like to hear a little bit about how you all have come together to move this to a department and really think about the difference that there might be from when it was a program for years and years and years to now being a department.
Thank you, Ashley, for having us on the podcast. We so appreciate the invitation and are humbled and honored to show up in this conversation. And I am Ruth Nicole, the inaugural chair. I'll take this question with the invitation, of course, as always, how we do, to please add on anything that I missed or just something you want to add. So I was hired in the year 2020 to start the Department of African American and African Studies as the inaugural chairperson. And it was really exciting to me to answer a call that desired an emphasis on Black feminisms, Black genders, Black sexuality studies from the location of Black studies in a university setting. So I was like, this sounds amazing, incredible, and what a dream. The fact that it was a new build of a department also excited me because I am an artist. So I love to create. And also the previous work that I came brought with me, Saving Our Lives, Here Are Truths, that I did before joining MSU was its own act of creation. So I felt confident in that work that is starting a new thing. And when I arrived, I learned just how new the department was. So we actually have the opportunity to create entirely anew. To give you a few examples, so when I arrived, the program had a space in Wells Hall. The department did not yet have a space. And so the current location, the physical location of the department is in North Kedzie Hall now. And I worked with the facilities team to decide how the space would be arranged. As I like to say, walls came up, walls came down. That's really how new the department is. And also with that, I was hired as a 100% appointed faculty with the opportunity to hire all new faculty who would be the core of the department. So I'll just stop there. That's a little sense of what the new build is about.
I'll add that we refer to the dreamers and builders from the program to the department as waymakers, and we list many of the waymakers on a mirror in one of our spaces in North Kedzie. And as new folks in a new department, oftentimes we are finding those waymakers through notes and boxes, through folks articles and chapters where they're talking about their own scholarship, but also mention the work they've done, the meetings that they went to that then became this dream. We also feel that the alumni are definitely a living archive, and we look forward to engaging with you and others. And oftentimes we found those PhD alumni through social media tags, and we're excited that there's a whole crew out there. But when we came in and began teaching our undergrads, our minors were our real life existing archive because they had been in the program longer than us as faculty and staff. And so we credit them, and we are also excited that we are building the present and the future and tending to this archive ourselves.
Hey, Yvonne here. And part of one of the changes from the program to the department as well, which is what I'm especially excited about, especially as an advisor, is now that we have a Bachelor's of Arts in AAAS. So for the first time ever at Michigan State University, students can major in African American and African Studies. And so we launched the major in 2022. And this year, a few weeks ago, we had our first graduates of AAAS as a major, 3 students who graduated. And that was incredible to witness.
Suban here. Actually, as someone who wanted to be in the program, I was actually going to apply in 2016, and the program shut down that year. So that was kind of my oh no. And so this return to was kind of beautiful for me. In that I ended up staying at Michigan State and staying in the program that I was in. I graduated from rhetoric and writing. But I found myself moved towards Black Studies, and I just was really sad that the program ended up, finding itself closing, and then rejuvenated by the fact that it became a department many years later, and that I found myself in it last year. So that was just my little story.
Share. That's really cool that not that they shut down, obviously, but you were able to connect and still be a part of it after it got more institutionalization. That's a really beautiful full circle moment. So kind of building on that, now that you all are here in this department, crafting and creating and building on what was there before, I do want to hear a little bit about how each of you got into the field of Black Studies, and what kind of keeps you committed to the field itself.
I'll start. It's LeConté here. I have 3, I think, shortish answers. The first is definitely through my home. I did not grow up in a family that called themselves scholars or called themselves Black feminists, but the types of books that were on our bookshelves, but also just in the cut in closets and in drawers, were many of the books that we read and teach in Black Studies. So Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni. My first poetry book was Nikki Giovanni's children's poetry book. But also my mom and dad were really passionate about finding free or accessible art spaces in the community that were Black and Black centered. So Black-owned bookstores and Black museums and art galleries. And oftentimes when I think about now in teaching, I try to invite or take students on field trips and it's to many of those same spaces. So home, I grew up in South Central LA. So those activities, those resources were my earliest points of Black Studies, even though we didn't call it that. Then I went to Spelman for undergrad and just got immersed in Black feminisms. And despite your major at Spelman, everyone got a Black feminist education, whether you were in STEM or the humanities or social sciences. Also, everyone has to take a class their first year, even if they're a transfer student or a exchange student, let alone first year students, called African Diaspora in the World. And it's Black Studies 101. Many of my friends and comrades at Morehouse thought it was a, male bashing class. But when we invited them to come in, they realized oh, this is Blackness. This is Black Studies. And that centering feminisms and Black feminisms isn't taking away from any other gender. And then third, I think it was a mix of one of my mentors, Dr. Nikki Jones, who's the current chair of African Studies at Berkeley, is trained as a sociologist, as a Black feminist sociologist. But when she came to Berkeley to be professor in African Studies, she felt that wasn't really a change from what she was doing, even though it was a quote unquote disciplinary change. And she felt the call to quote unquote change disciplines to challenge herself a bit more. She felt that like her home discipline of sociology, she had explored a lot. She had played, she had experimented, she expanded, and that Black studies allowed her to like fly and soar and mess up and get funky even more. And so the invitation of AAAS was like a similar invitation that despite our disciplines or our anti-disciplines, that this is really a space to keep doing what we're doing, but do it even more funky, do it even more live, to play, to color, definitely outside the lines, but also to color collaboratively and to not be an only. Some of us were used to being an only, and not just Black or Black feminists, but just the kind of ways that we do art and do scholarship in our other spaces. And now we definitely are squad, how we refer to ourselves out loud in events, at meetings, but also on social media, #squad. And we really are working to squad up and realizing that is a practice.
I will say I came from rhetoric and writing, rhetorical studies, which is a very predominantly white field. I mean, in every class I taught, it was like technical editing and technical writing. And I was like, Black technical writing, Black technical editing. So everything I was doing, I was trying to teach in light of Blackness, and even with Black studies in mind, which was welcomed, but I just wasn't like I grew tiresome of it, and it was welcomed. I'm grateful for that in the field that I was in, but it was refresh. I say that in AAAS, I can be my whole self. I don't have to, it's not, I'm making it Black. It just is. And so it's refreshing to just not have to, I think a joke that I applied for a grant this semester for a class that I'm teaching, and I'm writing the syllabus, and the grant was, you have to make 25% of the class Africa focused. I was like, well, I'm doing that anyway, so I guess I'll take your money. Thank you. It was just ironic that was part of the grant, but it feels refreshing that it's something I'm already doing and that's something I'm paid to do now versus something I'm enforcing on a department.
I love a good segue. So speaking of technical writing, back in during my undergrad, I went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and a lot of the student orgs, we were adamant that we enroll in the African American Studies courses because we knew if we weren't in those seats that those courses would likely be eliminated. And so after every event that we had, it could have been a Black student organization, National Society of Black Engineers, the Divine Nine. We always made sure, especially at the turn of the semesters, we need to enroll in these seats. And so that was my first formal introduction, involvement in Black studies at the academic level like that. And so when I finally decided, let's go back to school and get a PhD after a lovely gap of a few years, my deal with myself was that I will study something that brings me joy. And I was like, cool, we got social movements, love them, social change, yes, and social media. And at that time, I was looking at how Black women were navigating Twitter. So this is about 2014-15, and seeing all the hashtags that Black women have created and the change that it has sparked in different parts of the world. And so we're going to study Twitter. 2017, it's still kind of newish. I've always got my way into Black digital studies. And so that was the work that brought me joy, was Twitter, was Black women on Twitter. And the Twitter sphere, it changes rapidly. So even what I was looking at, or what brought me to the study, to the field in the mid 2000s, the way that the digital sphere has changed, my study how to also evolve. Twitter looked different in 2017 by the time I graduated in 2021. But yes, that was my deal to myself, was to study something that brought me joy. And Black digital studies, here we go.
How did I get into Black studies? This is Ruth Nicole. I would first say that my parents, for sure, as LeConté said, my house, we did Black studies in my house from day one. And that included a lot of reading and Black feminism too, I would add. I mean, so right, the same names, Nikki Giovanni, I was reading. J. California Cooper was my mom's favorite. Alice Walker, you know, I wanted to sneak and get the book off my mom's bookshelf because she was really into it. And so that's where I counted that. I also grew up in the Black church, and the particular church that I was raised in for generations, I saw on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, how you could create change in a community. And I had a clear sense of what was needed in our community because of how our church organized. I also had a knowing, because I saw it again on the daily, about the ways Black women would get together and create change, create beauty, create what was needed. Relax, enjoy each other's company at a young age. Also grew up in Chicago Heights and Park Forest. In Park Forest, where I lived, we stayed in a section of a town called Eastgate, and Eastgate was predominantly Black and had a very vibrant Black social life, which taught me a lot about difference, playing outside and learning about the variation, the rich histories of Blackness just along that block. That's where I played Black girl games, and learning just different techniques, technologies, as we might call them, as Tony K gave us, of living from growing up in Eastgate. And then I was first in my family to go to college and wanted to major in several different things, many of which were not, I guess, as acceptable for my family, because I was the first. And so they had a lot of their dreams pinned onto mine, which I then, as a dutiful daughter, accepted and was like, okay, I kept trying to major till I came home with one that stuck. And that was political science. I said, okay. And I majored in political science because I had an amazing mentor by the name of Dr. Diane Penderhughes, who not only would allow, but applauded my remixed versions of the Black arts movement as politics in her class. And Diane Penderhughes was my McNair mentor. So I went to undergrad when McNair was still fully funded. And thanks to Dean Jeffrey, gave me a way to even apply to graduate school. And I also want to lift up Diane, because at the same time as I knew her as a professor in political science, she was also the director of the Black Studies program at that university. I went to University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And so as many undergraduate students who, you know, have a professor, a favorite professor, you just follow them everywhere, right? You take whatever course they're teaching. And it was so normalized to me that because Diane was director of Black Studies, I mean, yeah, we walked back and forth from our political science office to Black Studies. And I remember that space was also ours. So for me in my undergrad experience, Black Studies and political science was extremely intertwined. and mostly because of the labor of this Black woman who's so brilliant, Dr. Diane Penderhughes. And she gave us the space to grow our ideas and to think with liberation in mind in political science and Black studies. So it was such a seamless education received because of her leadership and others also at that university who nurtured it. What keeps me committed? So many things keep me committed, for sure, on the love of Black people. First and foremost, the necessity for ongoing liberation, Black folks. The new worlds that we build and create that I know are on the way and are surely needed keeps me committed. And then very tangibly, I think of my children, I think of our children. And I mentioned the work of Soul High. Many of those girls who I connected with when they were 12 are now mothers. And I'm so excited to see one of their children walk through the door saying, hey, my child is thinking about coming to MSU. And so they surely keep me committed.
Thank you. That was very affirming, right? About how you all are coming from different perspectives, but it comes together under the umbrella that is Black Studies. And I think that is so necessary in keeping this field going, and the ways in which a lot of times, even within Black Studies departments and Black Studies programs, right, you have all these varying perspectives coming in. 9 times out of 10, just because of numbers and what's available, you do have faculty that predominantly are disciplinarily trained in other areas, right, but come together under Black Studies. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about how you situate yourself disciplinarily within Black Studies. So whatever your training is, right, that's coming together, particularly in a Black Studies department, how you see that as working towards this Black Studies field development and future.
LeConté again. One of my professors from Spelman, Dr. Mona Taylor Phillips, she wrote a few years ago in a chapter in the edited volume, Black Feminist Sociology, that we can know a discipline without being disciplined by it. And I just love that. And I feel that I live that. My master's and doctoral programs were in public health. In undergrad, I was sociology at Spelman. Spelman also being liberal arts. So I feel like I started higher education as undisciplined or anti-disciplinary or transdisciplinary. My doctoral program at Berkeley in public health was rhetorically transdisciplinary. And they even wrote a paper about how they distinguish that between multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, that the transdisciplinary is really around bringing other disciplines together with public health, but also creating something new from that, like changing and creating something new, answering new questions with new answers. And so I describe myself as transdisciplinary, but I also like to throw on other labels and languages and also things that don't have words. So undisciplined, I use that. I think I've heard Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs use that. Anti-disciplinary, like always ready to be a disruptor. And in AAAS, all of us coming from various backgrounds, including Black Studies, folks that have majored and got degrees in Black Studies, and also all of us all around, and even creating our own disciplines. I know that, like Dr. Taylor Phillips said, we're not disciplined by them, right? So we're bringing those tools and technologies also to Colin, Tony Cavenbar when they're useful, but we're also always creating anew. And so as for me, public health, as that informs my work in Black Studies and AAAS, then I use it. But the things that are constraining, that are oppressive, or that are too traditional or too boxed in, then I leave that outside. It being in AAAS as a person trained in public health, that really has offered me an opportunity to really expand what I'm calling wellness humanities, wellness technologies, and getting again beyond health. We say in AAAS, beyond survival into wellness. So really exploring how Black folks have always been tending to that. And that's not just in public health. We talk so much about disease and illness and disability and death. And really, this is a chance to really explore like what is living, what is thriving.
So on paper, my at the grad level, my background, I was housed in the College of Education, but following what I really wanted to research, again, that put me into the lovely world of Black digital studies and so digital humanities. And even within my research, what I really loved about it was that I had to explore different fields. So looking at Twitter, pushed me to also consider communications. What are the different communications that we engage in? Let's go into Black oral histories and storytelling, and how does that show up and reflect on a social media site? Looking at technologies, what are the affordances of different technologies? Now we go into journalism and mass media, and again, like how does this impact how we communicate, produce knowledge, and consume it as well? Of course, looking at Black women on Twitter, now we have Black feminisms, considering the digital as a whole within itself, looking at how we take up space, what's the context of that space, how we take over space, what are different counterpublics, enclaves, satellites, and how that is pertinent to us in both the physical and the digital. And then again, looking at how Black women navigate Twitter and how we make it work for ourselves, it definitely wasn't created with Black folks in mind. That also ventured me over into capitalism, entrepreneurship. And so even just trying to find one singular thing within Black digital studies that interests me, I was able to consider a range of different fields and look at how it impacts how we navigate the world, both in the physical space and then impact our experiences in the digital as well. So I feel like I know a little bit about a lot of things. And then also looking at these different ranges of academic disciplines from a Black feminist lens as well. And then looking at the different power structures in the systems, how we can use that to address different inequities in digital spaces that are often overlooked by different theories, or also using them to challenge and critique these dominant narratives on research, or that we have in research on race and gender as well. And so that's what I really appreciated about navigating this, is being able to venture over and, figure out how does Blackness look like in a range of disciplines and not just one singular neat little box.
I can jump in there with the question of disciplinarity. Let's see. So I'm always curious and interested in Black people, Black communities, and that is just a part of who I am, and I take that everywhere. And so for me, again, I talked about choosing a major as an undergrad was really a big lesson in and of itself, because I wanted to do all the things all at once, all the time, everywhere. And then I was like, then I started learning about the institution and was like, actually, this major, if it was a professional program, could only take this many students a year. This one. So I was like, what about my curiosity about my intellectual life? And I was like, it's just about my institutional formation. And again, as a political science undergrad major, I went to a doctoral program in political science. I think this is as the first generation student in me, honestly. If I had known about different kinds of departments, I probably would not have pursued a doctorate in political science, but it was what I knew. And I stayed with it until I was extremely frustrated by the disciplines, particularly in doctoral training. They weren't as receptive to the Black arts folks that I was bringing in, into the ways that I was, attempting to remix methodology to many of the ideas of Black feminism. And so I was like, what is really going on here? And I think that's at the doctoral level as a graduate student, I started to question it all. All that the university was talking about. And I learned as a doctoral student about this thing called interdisciplinarity, and sought out interdisciplinary spaces and gender women studies and performance studies. And I did encounter some resistance to Black feminisms in Black studies. So I didn't stay very long there at the time as a doctoral student. But as a postdoc, was after that, I went and did a postdoc in Black studies. So I was actually able to return to a space on campus that I loved. And in fact, it was that very same space that Dr. Peter Hughes made, because I returned to my undergrad campus. Again, already feeling a sense of belonging in Black studies there, and did a postdoc. Made several promises to myself. And one of the implicit promises was that I would refuse the discipline of political science. After I got the degree, I was like, hey, I don't have to do that anymore. And that's amazing and great. And since then, have not pursued any kind of appointment in political science. I've only committed to sort of interdisciplinary spaces in the institutional setup, and that was intentional and by choice. I think my dream of the university is not organized by departments. Quite honestly, can do without the discipline. I started after Anti-Bariana came out, actually. That's when I was like, I'm anti-disciplinary. And yeah, that still feels like a very good space for me to think and remain curious in, because the questions I have, the way my imagination is set up, I'm constantly just embracing the allness of everything, as well as the all incompleteness of everything, in search of something else that is, for me, much more generative than a single discipline, or even some of the ways that interdisciplinary is practiced at the university. I will say another way I did attempt to practice interdisciplinarity was to be affiliated with almost every department that I wanted to be in contact with. And that was actually great. I mean, to a certain extent, because it did allow me to do that. It was nothing to find me on North Campus in the physics department, as well as the fine arts folks who, call me colleague because they saw me around a lot. Very active 0%, I like to say there. And then, having gone up through tenure in 2 colleges, that was just the way that I practiced it, until that became, I guess, unsustainable. And also part of my call to MSU, back to Black studies, was the joy of being in one department. So, yeah. Well, hopefully we can bring all those conversations here instead of having to go out and traverse the Big Ten campus, because it's a lot. That's a lot.
For sure. Dr. Cooley, did you want to add to that one?
Sure, I can say, I'm grateful in terms of being undisciplined. I think at the very core of who I am, I'm always someone who has loved to write, and that has been a thread from day one in everything I've done, which is great. But after the AAAS program closed, and I was fortunate to stay at MSU, I had taken all the core classes for the PhD in my MA, which then afforded me the capacity to maintain undisciplinarity. So then I got a women's and gender, specialization. I was able to apply for the foreign language area specialization, which afforded me an international development specialization. And almost like someone's like, you basically kind of have a sociology PhD now because of all the classes you've taken. So if you looked at the classes I took in my PhD, I think I had like one rec class, because I took the core in my MA. And so I didn't really need to take rhetoric in my PhD. And then was afforded the capacity to kind of think through the questions I was asking about Black women, culture, migration and displacement, what happens to Black cultures in different spaces, and Black communities in different spaces outside of Africa, which are the questions I was asking, rhetorical questions I was asking in my research. So that exploration of the research questions got to get fleshed out because I got to do that undisciplined work by learning more outside of field. And I'm grateful for that. And so whatever my degree I graduated from a program, but really I was all over the place, and I kind of maintained that, the same as LeConté. I don't belong anywhere specifically except for where I am right now, the Wiz Squad.
Thank you. I think that that's a really good segue, especially with Dr. Cooley, because you come from RAC. And when I was in the program of AAAS, part of our funding packages were to teach RAC courses. So that is how my PhD was paid for, was teaching RAC. And then even following getting my PhD, I went and taught in a writing and rhetoric program following that, right? And so I think a lot of my pedagogical training has been writing and composition, which I think is really helpful in a lot of ways. But I think about how that has carried over into the classroom, right? And the work that I've done in the classroom and the ways that I think about pedagogy explicitly. And so personally, I am very interested, particularly at R1s, how we think about a Black Studies classroom. How do we think about what it means to be a Black Studies classroom and how that could look different from classes that are taught by other departments and programs. So anyone like to speak to their work in the classroom and what teaching Black Studies means to you or looks like to you?
This is coming off of our spring retreat. 3 days, 2 days we spent talking about pedagogy. So I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say. I'm going to share mine at the end. I'm already want to call the last one to respond to that.
So speaking of the retreat, it really afforded us a time to talk with each other. Like, we knew a little bit of hints of like, oh, you're doing that over there. But this really allowed all of us to talk and hear and dream and, take notes about what we might do in the future. And what I love so much is just hearing, in addition to what I'm already doing, but just hearing what colleagues like, shout out Dr. Sherry Lewis, who was all about pushing desks to the side, and the classroom is centered on blankets and sheets and candles and incense and really making it a home, not just place, but space. And also the learnings in that, like students maybe at the beginning of the semester being like, okay, I'm down to try this. And then kind of also feeling uncomfortable, like, I'm used to being in a chair and a desk. Ruth Nicole, first semester out the gate, taking students outside for classes by the river, the lovely spaces in nature at AAAS. I said before, like I love a good field trip and carpooling and getting to see students outside of our traditional campus. So being at the local apothecary and the local Black-owned bookstore, eating food together, going to restaurants, and sometimes I was finding out that our students, even spaces that are like 5 minutes away, they haven't gone to. Even the museum, the Bell Museum on campus, taking students there for different Black-centered exhibits and realizing, like, even some of our seniors, like, I've never been to this space, and it's free, and wow, they have art that actually relates to me, and I didn't even go here. So we do things inside the classroom, but we also, you know, always freak it and look outside of it. What I love about us, I think, across the department is just how we also just bring in sound. We're always attending to art, visual art, sonic art, performing arts. Dr. Shamara Kwachi is always doing a performance, curating, writing scripts with students, and then inviting us in, not just our department, but the whole university to be audience members, but very much participatory audience members. Students are always making playlists. I say that they can make playlists in their sleep. And so sometimes, in addition to that being an assignment, we often craft that, like, this is actually part of the text of our work. So the sonic, if we look at our website, we all have sonic introductions. We have our own mixtapes that describe us. So definitely, folks, check out our website and listen to it, right? And so sonic, I think, is a big part of us, in addition to the various other arts of our classroom spaces.
What's fun for me in the classroom, and I think for students as well, is especially here at Michigan State University with still a PWI, in our courses, it's majority Black students, which is what's unique for me. And then it's unique for our students as well. And I think we've all done a fabulous job at creating an environment and a space in our courses where students feel like they can show up as their authentic selves, as we do as instructors, as faculty, as well. One of the things that brings me joy in the students as well is for them to be able to connect different concepts or theories to their own lived experiences. And it's like, oh, that wasn't a coincidence. There's a name to that. And that's always fun at that little fun light bulb moment. We always leave space for celebrations in our courses. Celebrations and announcements. It could be small things on a grander scale. Towards the end of the course, beginning, middle, I love to see how our students start to or continue to affirm themselves, affirm each other. And sometimes there's a lot of unlearning that we all need to do in the classroom. So it's usually, for me, it shows up in the form of the final, where instructions might be rather vague for them, where they can pick, like, this is what I want my final to be. And sometimes I feel like students think that's a trick question. Like, what you mean I can pick my own final? Like, no, you can pick it. There's parameters, but, play to your own strengths and to your own interests. And I think another thing that we do well as a department as a whole is how we center and emphasize students' wholeness and their own well-being. At a department level and then in our courses as well. So in my course, we schedule wellness days, and sometimes we engage in that as a course, as a class. And then sometimes it's like, no, I need y'all to go and do something else that's not class specific related. Take a nap, go for a walk, we're going to journal, have a tea party, do something. And then we're going to talk about it when we get back. But emphasizing wholeness and wellness is also needed.
I feel like the students, I think there was a moment in a class, I just have to relay that happened this semester. And a student was just like, it's just amazing to me that we could be, they were talking about the Black experience specifically. And they were like, it's just when white people, blah, blah, blah. And then they were just like, sorry, Olivia. And then it was just a very raw, real moment. But it was the reality of it being a majority Black space and place in a predominantly white institution that they could be so raw and real. And even Olivia be like, it's cool, like, but just the realness of the moment, and everyone, even Olivia, be cool with it. It was just, it's a real soft place to land, honestly, which is so rare, and so affirming in an institutional setting. I don't think that's you can't it's not something you can try to you can't fake that. That's something that just kind of happens. It just happens because of the people that are in that space, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah, so that's my contribution.
Wait, follow-up question though. This was your first semester teaching, so how was that for you in general?
I mean, again, I'm grateful because I will say the institution I was at before, I had the pleasure also of having a very predominantly Black class, but it was different only that it was a predominantly Black African continental class. I worked at New Mexico State University. It was a graduate course in technical communication. These students were from West Africa, and it was an intimate class of about 10 students, 8 from the continent. But this class is like students are 34, and 34 students, 4 white, 30 Black. I think it's just different to kind of, and again, being being a school I went to, knowing what it feels like to be in the Midwest, you can't, you can't build rooms like that in Michigan. So I feel like if I were an undergrad, I would want that for my child. So I honestly feel like, how RAC has the 101s. I feel like every Black student should take, like AAA should be a 101 for every for every Black student.
I would agree with that, particularly in the Midwest on that campus. It's a lot. It's a lot. As someone born and raised in Lansing, it's a lot.
Listen,
I know.
Listen.
He's from
born and raised.
As you put in knowledge, like in addition to you being an alum, that Lansing knowledge, we will definitely be tapping you for other technologies that you have.
Come back home, Ashley. No. Let's see. I want to go last because you can hear just how dope and amazingly brilliant everyone is. And that's one of my favorite things about the department is that everyone is on their A game in the classroom. The pedagogical emphasis that each one of us brings is distinct. So, for example, I like to do every class as a kind of performance art is how I approach when thoughts about pedagogy. And we have the Dill effect, and we have Dr. Lewis, and we have students who line up out of my office every time a class from Dr. Jones and Tasha Jones is wrapped. And they're like, I just want to stop by to tell you how great my class was. And I was like, I bet I know who they're going to say. Also speaks volumes about just how amazing the students are here, how receptive they are to what we are offering in the department. And to go back to some of how we are building anew, Yvonne is currently working on our student learning outcomes. That was a discussion we had in our retreat that she is finalizing and paring down for us to make usable. What are our student learning outcomes? We get to decide those. In my time being here for 4 years, some of the things I observed that we do really, really well is, and I think this is important and maybe new for some undergraduate students, but students often find their purpose in our courses. They often learn new talents that they have that they didn't know that they had. They are supported in their curiosity and practices, which they don't always find outside of Black Studies. I think one of my favorite student projects was one that was completed in Yvonne's class the whistle project, and like the Black histories around whistling and gestures is so important. And that project was so brilliant. And I was like, I don't know where else in the landscape of this university would they have been able to do as much with whistling as Black Studies as they did in that class. It was so amazing. I also want to say too, Tony Cade is one of our guides as we build, and I think students also learn what it's like to live with the weight of wellness, and so they don't have to struggle to be seen in our classes. They are seen. They are known. What we don't know about them, we also respect. And usually they're just fighting so hard to keep their spirit together in other classes, that in our classes, they get to know that, be confident in that, and then see what's kind of after that. One of the things too, I think particularly because the department was built in 2020, as I like to call that treacherous year on the clock of the world, we were building when we were still in quarantine. And there's so much that I do have to say about what it means to build a department during that global pandemic. But part of that for me is, again, my commitment to Black studies, and so much of what I know about the expansiveness of Blackness is social. And so part of what I'm committed to in the classroom is practicing the art of Black sociality with students who spent a large part of their formative years being quarantined alone, told to maintain a certain distance, which means that a lot of the social practices that we just, I take for granted, they didn't experience. And so for me, my commitment to practicing community, to practicing the art of sociality is certainly, I think, necessary and useful. And our students then take that outside of the classroom too, which is exciting. But yeah, I'm also still like, before the pandemic, I didn't want even like the physical container of a classroom to exist. And I wrote so much about abolishing the physical classroom. And then, the pandemic, and then coming here to MSU, where I feel like here, one of the great things about teaching is the classroom as a unit of mobilization is still a very real thing here. And so I'm now rethinking what it means to be in a quote unquote physical container while also still trying to be out of it and do all those things, which the times I think demand and require.
Thank you. These are amazing work that's happening in the classrooms. As I said, that's like where my interest right now lies specifically. As a director of undergraduate studies, I'm very interested in how we can make our classrooms spaces students want to be in beyond, fulfilling gen ed credits and ensuring that they get more out of it in the ways that you all referenced, something that fulfills them and feeds them, not just is a checkbox on a transcript.
Absolutely. And I think we have to do that to meet the students where they are. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about our students who are makers. They crochet, they're into fashion, and, it's like, that's a curriculum question. How many classes do we have where students are intentionally like working with their hands? This is what they're telling us that they like to do. This is how they think. This is the knowledge they're creating. It's aesthetics, and I love aesthetics. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you, and always wanting to be relevant and, fantastic in the heightened sense of Black fantastic.
I would also add 2 of my most memorable classes are specifically centering play. So in Black Girlhood Studies, in spring 2023, we did hand games. And of course, centering that on the, important scholarship of Dr. Kira Gahn and of Soul Hot. But just to have an hour and a half to play hand games. And part of that was like also like the students, regionally, like, how do y'all say it? We use this phrase and we use this phrase, and students that didn't know it, but were like down to learn. But also me, like, I haven't played some of these in 30 years, but that muscle memory that comes back, that just gave me so much joy. And I was so amped afterwards. Like Ruth Nicole talks about students coming to her, like after, but I'm like, I'm coming to you to talk about how amped. And then this semester, I taught a class centering wellness that is currently an elective, but soon becoming one of our core classes, permanent classes. And towards the end of the semester, a student group was leading us in movement technologies, centering the work of Dr. Tony Yancey and Instant Recess and Let's Move. But they taught the class the Tamia Hustle. And being a Cali girl, I am not a hustler. I usually leave the dance floor because in Michigan, every song is a hustle song. But finally, after 3 years of living here, I know the Tamia Hustle, and it was dope. Because
That's the education we get.
I'm always down for a flipped classroom, but it was also amazing to see students that even when earlier in the semester they were asked to lead classes, some students still weren't ready to go in the front of the class. But when we were dancing, like students that I had not really heard from all semester just came alive. And I'm always down to be a learner, and they were like giggling like Dr. Dill doesn't know this. But then when I got into it, that they loved. And so I just love that vulnerability, that play, that giggle, that like, oh, I am sweating. Like, this is my cardio. And then like a week later, I was at a party and like I could be leading to me, not leading, but like I can be in the middle of the circle. I could be in the middle of the circle and not leaving the dance floor. So I definitely like credit. I'm always learning from our students. I think we are often always learning from our students.
It's always a treat to hear like what they're learning in the classroom, but hearing it outside of the classroom. So LeConté, like 2 for you, I think I might have told you already, but our majors were talking about, what they've gained from AAAS in general. And one of them explained like, in the past, like there'd be a child there and screaming and they're just yelling and da 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 da. But, after her class, I can see like there's wonder in that. Or in centering wellness with certain assignments, they would come in my office and be like, yeah, I know this assignment is due tomorrow. But Tony told us that being well is a lot of weight, and I don't think I'm ready to do this. Of course, they got it done, but it's always a treat to hear how they're experiencing other faculties' courses. And then also citing outside of the classroom as well, how they embody our values. It's always a treat to witness.
Thank you all. That was super interesting. And like I said, I think that's one of the things that always struck me about Black Studies, period, right? Is it's the pedagogy, it's the teaching, it's the engagement with students that it was born out of. And so so the ways that we think about that moving forward are super interesting and important. So I definitely want to be respectful of all of your time. So I'm going to combine these last 2 questions I have. But what interests and excites you most about both the past and the future of Black Studies?
I can begin then in silence or stating the obvious of us being the future, being here and now. And so I have to shout out my colleague, Sandra Ruiz, who flipped this turn of phrase in relation to Soul Hot and the work and the words that I brought here with me of being the future's future, which I very much think and know our department is. And that's what's exciting to me for so many reasons that we've already shared, for building as squad. And I think, again, I'm stating the obvious that when that word is used, at least for me, it is meant to signal that, there's also a very significant politics at work in our department that we ask folks to engage that is not often taught in these academic suite institutions. that requires knowing how to be in community, knowing how to show up, commitment to staying, Black in all of its expansiveness. And that is incredibly exciting to me. We have a wellness room in the department. I talked earlier about creating the physical space, and there is dedicated space for wellness in our department. There's also a recording studio, and I'm really excited about the sonic and audio technologies of living that will come through our department, that will be made in our department. And yeah, those are a few of the things that I'm excited about, I guess, as well as to the commitment to the arts and scholarship. I'm very clear in my usage of those words. And I am overjoyed to be a part of this department that is intentionally also creating changes in higher education. Particularly, I'm thinking here of the work that we are doing with writing our bylaws collectively, ensuring that creative works and research and all the different formations in which we produce knowledge, circulate knowledge, are accounted for as folks grow up. And I'm also, I think the times, of course, require this and maybe have motivated us faster than the university would have changed unprovoked. But I'm thinking about Dr. Geneva Smitherman, who cautioned in her memoir about becoming overly concerned with careerism. And I'm thinking about Suban and I recently participated in a symposium dedicated to Mashiri Mugo's work. And one of those poems, she talks about the imposters of the academy. And I think that that's always been a concern and caution with institutionalizing Black studies. Again, you hear our calls to squad, which already signaled that we're doing something else that is around social responsibility and encouraging community and committed to Black study fundamentally. And I think, again, that we will return to more of that, again, because the times demanded is where I was going. But I also am now, as I'm sharing, just looking at us in this conversation and thinking about our faculty, know that we are all committed to engaging various communities, Black communities, and how we are actually making that work of what was called social responsibility, creative play, creative world making, irresistible, to bring Tony Cade back into it as a full circle. And so I'm sure many folks will just take as the way to do Black studies, the way we're doing it. And that's incredibly exciting to me, because it's creative, it's engaged, it's with people, it's outside of these university walls as it is inside. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
What excites me is that like our Black studies and Black feminist luminaries who are still with us on this plane and are more seasoned, that they are checking for our department. Dr. Geneva Smitherman, Dr. Nicole just brought her up, in addition to being one of our waymakers, was at our Ascension event when we lifted off our department, and not just there to be honored and to be witnessed, but she was also dancing and playing during our event. Dr. Beverly Guy Shefdahl likes our social media posts about our department. Dr. Carol Boyce Davies gave, in particular, Ruth Nicole Brown a shout out at the recent Mugo Symposium. So seeing that love from folks that we revere, that we cite, and that we are in community with, but to see that they're like rooting for us, that they're checking for us, and to know that folks are checking for us that we might not even know, like traveling abroad. I know that because of our presences, the Sonic introductions, our social media, our website, our fly photo shoots that we do, that folks are in tune. And even whether we know them or not, they are checking for us. Nikki Finney, who commissioned a poem for our Ascension and is a friend of the department. I knew her mostly from the page, but have gotten to know her in person since we've become a department. And as I've checked in with her, she has pictures of our photo shoot like at the ready. She's like, I look at this often. And just to know that we're like in people's heart, but in ways that are like just so intimate and so fly and so fun. It gives me joy about the past, the present, and the future.
Been going in between the joy and then the pain as well. So I was reading bell hooks yesterday. I wrote down like talking about joy and pain within the institution. It's not easy to name our pain or to theorize from that location. And so thinking about the harm that and the violence, even just within Black studies, but then also as Black women, as Black femmes in higher education, the harm and violence that comes with that. And how we intentionally choose different ways to focus joy in different areas, especially building a new department. And so I'm excited for this new build in general. It's a lot of labor, but it's still a lot of excitement in that to see what we can create, what it can be. This is what Black studies can be, with the focus on Black feminisms and sexualities and genders and wellness, wholeness, again, in higher education. We have the sonic, we have the visuals, you are the visual. And yeah, this is how we can engage Black studies in the academy. And it counts for us.
It's the survival into wellness for me. It's the collectivity for me. It's for me, we can't do it alone. We have to do it together. As someone from the continent, I don't see the Blackness as siloed. I see it as wholeness, as togetherness. And the more we do that, the better. I see it as colonial to see Blackness as separate. So that's my parting my parting gift. And I'm just grateful to be here as part of the squad, doing that work and looking into Blackness as collectivity.
Thank you all so much. I truly appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness and your answers. It has been a pleasure talking with you today. And of course, we look forward to seeing everything that is to come, continuing out of the Department of African American and African Studies at Michigan State University.
Right. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks.